Do you hear that issue?
Absolutely. I think Jesus ran into the same trouble.
Yeah.
And we all do. I mean, there's that whole tension between the elders and one's own experience. I like a line from Jesus that by their fruits you'll know them. I mean, let's not judge the visions. Let's see what's born out of this thing. And I look at what I know of your accomplishments, and I say, one way of naming what you've done is, here's another another prophetic Jew who's had to wander off, but has done the work, is doing the work of compassion, which is the ultimate gift of divinity as defined by the Jewish tradition. So I don't see.
I'm already feeling the nail holes in my hand watching it
right now. But trusting experience, of course, that's what all mysticism is about. And this is what we've been taught not to do, not just by the synagogue and the church in the modern era. They've just succumbed to this overall ideology that we're living in a machine. The machine's bigger than us, so the primary virtue is obedience. Well, that's what we have to cut through, and Einstein's done it for us. When he says, hey, this isn't a machine, the closest thing to it is like a zygote. It's a birthing thing. So the primary virtue isn't obedience, it's creativity. What are we giving birth to? And
the primary, what did you say, the primary?
Primary virtue is not obedience, it's creativity.
It's creativity,
Because that's the moral habit.
Yeah,
of
that's
the
where the
universe.
Spirit manifests. It's
And
becoming
lo
part of
and
the
behold,
manifestation.
Exactly. Aquinas says
But that is chutzpah within the institutions of the church.
Well, chutzpah is a healthy thing. It's about growing up.
That's why you had your troubles, because you thought it was a healthy thing.
Well, sure, because the structure of the church is not made that people become adults spiritually. It's made that people remain children spiritually.
But what I feel is most of the rituals, even the ones derived from the church in good heart, and I think much of the Native American ritual, forces dualism. It doesn't allow for what the Buddhists allow for, which is the merging into the creative force.
Sure, there has to be the via negativa. There has to be the silence, the honoring of the silence, and then the emergence into the creative force. Ritual is not just something coming at you. It must include the silence where Eckhart says it so wonderfully. The truth does not come from outside in. The truth comes from inside out and passes through an inner form. For the truth to come from inside out, silence is absolutely requisite. And the great mystics of church and Judaism have taught that. But so by ritual, I don't mean something that's prefabricated. Ritual itself has to be creative to match this habit of the universe. And that's what's so exciting, to get communities together, especially of young people, creating their videos each week, creating their trance dance music each week. And so that each week becomes a creative act of the community. Now that's ritual again. You see,
very nice.
The word liturgy in Greek means a work of the people.
Oh,
it doesn't mean a work of the few that are handed to the people. It's the work coming out of the people.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That has me excited.
So the way we talk about creativity in the Western societies most of the time, I notice in the East, for example, the artist doesn't sign his work or her work in certain cultures because they are merely an instrument for something to come through. In the West, there is a tremendous amount of ego involved in the creative act. And that seems to me to be a kind of a tension that is something that is a limiting condition.
Yeah. That ego and artistry, though, again, is part of the modern era of the West. In the Middle Ages, no one signed their name at Chartres Cathedral.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's part of the modern consciousness, self-consciousness and that ego thing. It's not all negative. I mean, developing the ego is I think, a significant accomplishment both in an individual's life and, if you will, in the evolution of human consciousness. But it ought to then, once it's developed, it has to go back into serving the community and even playfulness, which is ego loss. So I think that the key there is the community again. If artists were invited back to serve the community and not to do this private thing, I mean, artists have been banished during the Newtonian era. They've had a struggle for their egos just to survive. But artists ought to be invited back to be our leaders in education and in worship. And they've not been asked to do this for 500 years.
Oh, they haven't.
That's right. Really. So, and then the whole thing about bringing the art out of everybody, the artist out of everybody.
The creative act is seen as a luxury in our society,
Exactly.
rather than as a necessity.
Exactly. A necessity it is.
Yeah.
And the whole advertising industry, rendering us couch potatoes in front of television, is about thwarting and really aborting the artist in everybody.
Yeah.
So we take in everyone else's images, never have time to do our own. And I think this affects the fifth chakra too, the throat chakra. We get gagged on the consumer junk that we're taking in. And because
it never comes out.
Right, because our truth is not coming out. Our prophetic voice is not being trumpeted.
Yeah.
So we have 36% of registered voters voting in America.
Yeah.
Because people feel disempowered.
The word disempowered and the word and the feeling of not being able to be creative that's the same thing we're talking about, isn't it?
For me, they are, yeah.
And then we see television as playing a role in doing that process of disempowering. And then we say, well, maybe interactive television, maybe CD-ROMs, maybe that's going to be the change where people are going to express their involvement or something like that. I mean, I'm trying to look for a silver lining in the technological
sure. There's something there. I think
thing.
Internet is giving people an end run around academia, for one thing. I think academia has become so overpriced and elitist that I think we are inventing things at a more grassroots level that connect learning and spirituality again. The way I see it is we separate educated from learning, religion from spirituality, which you mentioned, and justice from law. And except for that, and stewardship from economics. Except for that, we're in a real good shape as a culture. But Heschel's idea, when Rabbi Heschel says, learning is not for life, learning is life.
Always beginning. Always be beginning. Yeah.
Always learning. As long as you're learning, you're alive.
Yeah.
When that stops, hey, bury us.
Yeah.
We've made education such an expensive, elitist, and structured thing. I mean, it's a new hierarchy. It's a new priesthood. The university you got kicked out of, for example. All that has to be deconstructed and reconstructed.
Well, I think that junior colleges and free universities and colleges without walls has changed the game completely.
That's true. And retreat centers and conference centers, adult education.
Exactly. The whole thing outside of the system. They just built a whole system outside the system.
And internet, I think, can help with that. And CD-ROMs and videos. People are learning with videos. Take it home and they can stop it, back up, and discuss, call neighbors in. It can be a new learning project, I think.
I find that, like tapes of lectures and things like that, I can't tell you how many, and I'm sure you have the same thing, hundreds and hundreds of people come up and say, you drive with me to work every day, you go to bed with me every night.
Quite intimate, isn't it?
Wow,
go to the
how intimate do we want to go? Yes.
No, writing still matters. Yeah, I have heard that too. Yeah, it makes you think twice.
Well, I really appreciate the technology that allows that process to happen,
that's right.
because that is the way we network and we recognize our shared heart.
Exactly. And the power of ideas comes through.
The heart, even the word the heart becomes so complicated to talk about. Are we talking about the anatomical heart, the emotional heart, the Atman, the still small voice within? Which heart do we refer to? But heart methods, like I think of gospel, I think of prayer, which I think of the way in which people can start from their heart because it's available. Relational emotions are a beginning process, like in bhakti yoga. The relational emotions start you in a process, and then slowly the depth of the love goes deeper and deeper until you are in love. It's no longer relational. But that method, talk to me about that method a little bit. Maybe just...
Well, when I think heart, I also think, of course, a respiratory system. So you're also talking breath. And this is where so many traditions, you led us in a fine little ritual the other day, about paying attention to breath, not taking breath for granted. And, of course, we shouldn't take our blood and our heartbeat for granted either. And that's the great mystery. And all you have to do is watch someone die to know what a gratuitous gift this is. And it can stop any time. So let's live it fully while we have it. And so I think methods that get us to breathe. And of course, meditation can be one such thing. But again, circle dancing, bringing the body, and not just circle dancing, trance dancing. Bringing the body back to worship is actually about awakening the heart. Because when the oxygen goes and you start sweating, your heart's working. Literally, as you know better than I, the oxygen's pumping in the brain. I mean, the whole being. And this is why exercise, too, is in fact heart work, of course. And so I just think this is so primal to healthy worship. But again, what we've done in the modern era, we've turned worship into a textual thing. We sit in benches, pews, and dare the preacher to keep us awake. And that's the only adventure there. In contrast, you go to a sweat lodge, and the adventure is whether you're going to get out alive or not. That creates community real fast, gets your heart pumping, even your adrenaline going.
Yes.
So you see, spirituality is not about clouds and puffy stuff. It's about the heart, the blood, survival, and ethics, essentially. And ethics are about survival, too. How do we get along without murdering one another, or the planet, or the other beings? And then what I experience in heart work, like, for example, say dancing in a powwow with indigenous people at night, what I feel when you get into it is there's only one heart. We're dancing to the heartbeat of the universe itself.
That's great.
And it's such a return to our origins, because for 9 months we were so close to that beat of our mothers that this brings it all back. And as an adult, then you're still in the womb, but you've now expanded the womb to be the universe, and it's God's womb, the womb of the Creator. And that's a good place to be, to get your energy and then go back to work or back to the struggle.
Yeah. I love when you go to a drumming thing, and it starts out, you can hear all the egos in the drums, and then slowly the drumming does the people.
That's wonderful.
You feel a transformation occur.
Aquinas, that's great. Aquinas says the first effect of love is melting.
Yeah,
I think that's wonderful.
That's
it's
beautiful.
So sensual. Isn't that beautiful?
That's absolutely
delightful. The melting of the you can melt egos. You don't have to beat them up and condemn them.
Exactly.
Melt them.
Exactly.
Put them in a bigger context.
Exactly.
I had an experience that I never forgot a few years ago when Thomas Berry and Brian Sim were doing the book on the new Cosmology universe story. They gathered about 25 thinkers to deal with the text with them for 3 days. When it was over, we went around the table, how'd it go? 2/3 of them said, I've never been in a group that had published so much and all this, had such big egos, where the egos were not showing, where we all got along, we were listening. And I commented that, look, this is because we were put in the context of cosmology. So, if the ego is put in a big enough place, hey, the universe can deal with it. It can absorb our pain. It can absorb our ego-ness. But it's when we do things anthropocentrically and set up our own private agendas that we beat each other up.
When you look at the other day in the violence session that we had that Sam Keen led, there was a woman who was a poetess, and she described her daughter being held at gunpoint and robbed. And she said that the daughter looked into the eyes of the guy and that his eyes were absolutely vacant. And she said she and her daughter were very frightened for days afterwards, not by the gun, but by the vacancy. Talk to me about that vacancy and what we're dealing with the breakdown of the listening to one another, or the trust, or something. I don't know how to describe it, but you hear it and you're working with it, I'm sure.
Well, I think despair. Aquinas says despair is the most dangerous of all sins. That when people are in despair, and what that really means, I think, is self-hatred, all kinds of violence can follow, because the love of self is missing there. And I suspect that vacant eyes are eyes that cannot even see oneself as lovable. And there's a lot of despair out there in our culture and civilization in our time. I was struck when you told that story. It was the first time I've heard it. I was not in your session. I met a woman a few years ago whose son was murdered at 19 on the street. She's an artist. And the murderer was a 21-year-old who's in prison. Well, make a long story short, she has befriended her son's murderer. They're very close friends. And now she has a meaning to her son's death. And the meaning is that she learned compassion. And that his killer learned compassion. So the idea that the soul can return to vacantize. It's so important. And I think prison work is so important today. So many of our young people are into violence. You know, Melodome says a culture without rites of passage has a sick soul, and you know it for three reasons. First, the young are violent. Second, there are no elders. And third, the adults are bewildered.
That's great. That's a great list of things.
It is, isn't it?
Great list.
And it's a lack of elders. I mean, the churches and synagogue are not doing their job.
Yep.
They're into religion and not spirituality enough.
Yep.
And the education is not doing its job. This is what elders should be handing on. And economics is not doing its job. People with money, elders, adults, are spending on adult agendas.
Yeah.
So we're asking for this kind of despair.
But the reason we don't have those elders is because we're not in a traditional society. In a traditional society, the elders have something to hand on. In a techno, whatever we are obsolete. I mean, if you don't know, a kid doesn't see you as a holder of wisdom because knowledge has supplanted wisdom. And if you, in a knowledge society, you don't have anything to give anymore because your knowledge is outdated so quickly.
Well, that's very true. I mean, if wisdom's not honored, but it's not accurate to say that we, meaning all elders, have no wisdom. I think you have a following, if you will, among the young. Yeah. Jerry Garcia had a following among the young. Mother Teresa does. I mean, there are people out there who have been mining the wisdom traditions, and the point is, how do we get these elders more into the mainstream? And there's a problem here, because it's adultism again, but it's not just about elders being resisted by the young. It's elders being resisted by older people, the people who are running the networks, the people who are setting the agenda of the political debates or the educational debates. And so this is why I think some have to try to work within our institutions and infiltrate them.
You take a look at the AARP, which is the lobby for the senior citizens. It is primarily concerned with housing, medical care, and safety. Those are fine. They should be basic concerns. But it's amazing how impoverished the agenda is about the role of elders in the society.
Exactly. So someone, maybe you or someone else, should join that organization and start raising a ruckus, writing letters to the editor of their newsletter and sitting down with the people at the top and all this, bringing this in. That's a very fine example.
Yeah.
When I look at their documents, it's like reading the old Union agenda. It's modern. It's not postmodern. It's not bringing in the spiritual dimension. And that's not enough. It's just encouraging a slow death of the soul for older people.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most learning from working on this subject of graceful aging?
Well, first I'm seeing the increasing dis-ease because the demography of an aging culture and a youth-oriented value system. So that a woman, for example, is in a very vulnerable position in the major society as she ages because of the value placed on youth and women. Men have an easier role in that. Theirs is more around power. Worldly power, and they have to deal with the loss or the transformation of worldly power to spiritual power somewhere along the line. I think that what I'm seeing is the predominant way in which, as the future gets shorter and the past gets longer for people as they age, they go from future orientation to past sentimentality. They don't rest in the moment, which is where the freedom is from the ravages of time, so to speak. And so I've been exploring in the book I'm writing the way in which one enfolds the past into the present and the future into the present. The future has the loss of energy, loss of function, dependency, death, dying and death. And that's a tasty menu for people. Recently, I was invited to speak at a very fancy benefit, And they said, what would you like to speak about? I said, well, how about dying? And they said, oh, no, nobody will come for that. Well, I said, well, what about aging? Oh, no, nobody will come for that. Well, I said, well, let's see what else I speak about. Suffering? No, nobody will come for that. And so I gave him another title, and I came and I spoke about dying, aging, and suffering. And one woman got up and said, why are you so negative? And I wasn't negative. I was joyful, but I realized how there is a certain no-no in the culture. Sure. And the way that the future is dealt with by older people is through massive denial to deal with the fear of these things. And so a lot of what I've been enjoying doing is supporting older people examining the fears of those things. You know, I've done things like take people to view a cadaver and just sit around like the Tibetan, like the Theravadan Buddhists do. They send the monk out into the cemetery where they throw the bodies to look at the decaying corpse, to feel the transitory nature of form. And so I'm seeing how to work with the fears of the future, because otherwise they capture you. And the incompleted tasks of the past capture you, and then you can't be in the present.
Well, really what I see that work is, the whole, as you say, the whole thing is being in the present. So that's an intensely mystical work.
Of course.
That's what mysticism teaches from every tradition, that the eternal is in the now.
Yeah.
And as Jesus said, the kingdom of God is, not will be, is among you. And this is what people have missed till they're 60, 65, 70 years old, you know. So what you're doing is intensely. But what I also hear you saying is, hey, all the chickens come home to roost in our old age.
Yeah.
Because when you list the issues there, suffering, our culture doesn't deal with suffering. We deal with drugs and saws, and that's what we get out of suffering, really, is to run and take something. We haven't learned and taught our young people, and therefore not ourselves, that suffering is a school. It's a school of wisdom. It's where your heart gets melted very often. And so, you know, I really see you're dealing with all the unfinished spiritual business of a culture that has not passed on spirituality to people. This seems like very important work. Very important.
You're talking about the issue of whether suffering is a drag or it's grace. Really.
It's both.
It's both. Exactly.
I love what Reverend Shachter says. There's more good than evil in the world, but not by much. I love the realism of that.
I say suffering stinks, and it's grace.
Perfect. Stinky grace.
Yeah, stinky grace.
And of course, and especially, of course, suffering that humans inflict on one another is intolerable. And that's where the West, the Jewish prophets, are so important. You know, Gandhi said he learned to say no from the West. And that's because the East easily gets stuck in this cyclical time thing and kind of, well, next time around you get reincarnated, things will be better, you know, next time around thing. And it was the rebel prophets like Jesus and other Jewish prophets who stood up and said, hey, now's the time around to bring justice and make it happen. And so the whole idea that a lot of suffering is intolerable and should be seen that way. A human injustice is intolerable and is not, therefore, a grace as such. It's something to be addressed and stood up to.
But it doesn't have to be an either-or proposition, does it? No. In other words, you can have a sense of the continuity of consciousness and even a reincarnational model and still feel very much the responsibility. On this plane, what is my work in this incarnation is to clean up the suffering as well as I can.
Absolutely. It can be that way.
Yeah.
And, of course, the continuity, to me, is part of the mystical view of the, yes, we are connected to all generations and all ancestors, and that gives us really the part of our empowerment to stand up and do something in terms of our courage and creativity this time around.
Yeah. How do you define which games you play at this point?
Which games you play?
I don't mean game. I mean game like role, social role, ritual, play, dance.
Yeah. Which work to say yes to?
Which work? We'll do it. What is your work?
Well, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I mean, I try to have advisors, listen to other people's advice, but ultimately I have to listen to my own conscience and intuition. This is certainly the case in moving. I mean, some people, when I moved to the Episcopal Church, said, "Why do that? Why don't you just, float out there?" And but I don't know. I just felt that here's something we can get done within an institution, and it could be powerful to work within.
That's great.
I listen is the best answer I can give. When it comes to books and what book you write and so forth. I often wish I'd wake up some morning with no book inside of me, but things keep coming up. I just finished my autobiography. In fact, this morning, to be truthful, I put the last corrections on it. And it wasn't my idea. It was my publisher's idea.
This is post Matthew now.
You
finished your autobiography this morning.
I gotta celebrate tonight.
You don't exist now because
I'm done. Huh?
You're done.
I never thought of it that way.
Hi, Fred.
Now I can live. Yeah. That freedom you're talking about.
Yes, well, you know.
But even that was not my idea originally. I fought against it. Oh, well, everyone else telling their story today.
Sure. I think when you get depersonalized enough about your own life data becomes just stuff you're intimately connected with that's good teaching material. I talk about myself always, all the time. That's all I seem to do. And it has nothing personal in it.
Well, storytelling, I mean, that's
storytelling,
that's
sure.
such a good thing. And it's really part of the postmodern way of learning that I don't think people trust very much today except stories. I know, for me it was dreams, right about the time you were being expelled. What year was that when you were expelled?
63.
Oh, was that early? Wow,
Yeah.
You were ahead of your time. But I was listening to my dreams around 1970, 71, because I was no longer trusting the institutions.
Yeah.
And it was in that process that I kind of got, what should I say, into my own story more deeply, I guess.
You use the word listening as far as hearing which way you're going in life. I find the combination of listening and Aurobindo had a beautiful image. He talked about you take a step, you fall on your face, you get up, you look sheepishly at God, you brush yourself off, you take another step, you fall on your face, you get up, you look sheepishly at God.
3 steps forward or backward, by the way.
But what I do is I surround myself with people who bust me.
Bust you?
Bust me.
What does that mean?
Means keep me straight. Keep me straight. Yeah. They say, how true is your intuition? You know, it feels resonant or it doesn't, and then I listen again. When I get a letter that's very critical of me, that stays on my desk a hell of a lot longer than a letter telling me how wonderful I am, because that's a mirror for me to go in and see what stuff I got to work with and whether my trip is a little off balance, because I can get off balance really easily. I mean, there are things of like power and sex and stuff that can still, you know, come up and see my holy pictures. I can see myself get caught in these horrible. I'm watching myself. This couldn't be me. Holy good me.
Yeah,
or you have $1 billion. Oh, Lawrence Rockefeller, do let's sit down. You know, I'm so interested in your.
Yeah, the truth in the shadow.
I understand, and I just have to learn how to play with my shadow in a loving, tender way, as Thich Nhat Hanh says. Be tender towards your anger and despair.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful image.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Embrace your enemy. Yeah.
Thank you, my dear. I think I've been told we're running out of time.
Okay, I've enjoyed it very much. I think I've been looking forward to this for years.
A continuing dialogue.
Heretics getting together.
Oh God. We have many categories.
Well, I've really enjoyed this sharing of heretical views with my brother Ram Dass. And it's a privilege to be with peers and others who have been out in the field and taken the heat, inner and outer, over the years, and still laughing and still walking the talk and trying to carry out whatever the role of compassion means in our time. So thank you, Ram Dass.
Thank you, Matthew.